Chapter 1. The battlefield was quiet. Too quiet. After months of brutal engagements and countless failed attempts to breach the Drekkari defenses, the humans had found themselves on the precipice of annihilation. The Drekkari, an ancient and seemingly invincible species, had crushed every resistance that stood before them. Earth's fleet had been decimated. Cities burned. The last remnants of humanity's military strength were scattered, barely hanging on to the hope that one final strike could turn the tide. Captain Elias Harper stood on the observation deck of the flagship Argonaut, staring out at the distant stars. He didn't need to look at the reports to know what was coming. The message was clear. The Drekkari were marching toward Earth. Humanity's last line of defense would fall soon, and with it, the last remnants of hope. Captain, the voice broke his thoughts. It was Commander Lena Rodriguez, the mission's operations lead, her expression a mix of determination and concern. "We've received the final intel," she said, handing him a digital tablet. "The Drekkari are launching a full-scale attack. Earth's defenses won't hold much longer. But there's one chance. One shot." Harper looked down at the tablet. A schematic of the Drekkari citadel, their impenetrable fortress, appeared on the screen. Inside, deep within its core, lay the heart of their power, a core that, if destroyed, could disable their energy shields and render their fleets vulnerable. He ran his finger along the schematics. "One shot?" he asked, his voice steady. Lena nodded. "It's our only hope. We've developed a weapon, a sniper rifle with a projectile designed to pierce their energy shields. But it needs to be fired from a specific position, one that's well beyond the reach of any conventional strike." Harper's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. The Drekkari had shields that could withstand the most advanced human weapons. To destroy the core would take more than just brute force. It would require finesse, precision, and timing. The mission, the task, was impossible, but there was no other choice. "If this works," he said quietly, "we might have a chance." Lena didn't respond immediately, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or the glimmer of something more primal. "We have to believe it will work," she said. Harper exhaled slowly. His mind went over the logistics, the plans, the sheer improbability of success. He had led soldiers through hell before, but this was different. The odds were insurmountable, the risk absolute. But that's what war was, risk. "You'll lead the mission," Lena continued. "You're the best sniper we have. We can't afford any mistakes." Harper didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." The team assembled on the outskirts of the Drekkari homeworld's atmosphere, cloaked from any detection. The Argonaut had made the impossible journey, slipping through enemy territory with minimal resistance. Now they waited. Time was running out. Earth's defenders were preparing for their final stand, hoping that Harper's team could pull off the impossible. He surveyed the rest of his team. 3 of the best snipers in the human forces, each handpicked for their ability to focus under extreme pressure. They weren't just marksmen, they were survivalists, tacticians, and strategists. Together, they made up a lethal force with a single mission: to land the one shot that could change everything. 5 minutes, Harper said as he adjusted his gear. His rifle, a custom-built sniper, lay at his side, the weapon gleaming in the dim light of the dropship's interior. "You sure this'll work?" Jordan, one of the snipers, asked. He was young, barely 30, but his hands were steady as he checked his equipment. "It has to," Harper replied, his voice low but certain. "This is our only chance. We don't get a do-over." Jordan's face hardened, and he nodded. He understood the gravity of what they were about to do. The entire human race depended on a single bullet fired at a single target, one that could end their existence if it missed. The dropship lurched as it entered the Drekkari atmosphere, heading toward the outskirts of the citadel. The night was thick with shadows, the air a violent mix of dust and energy fields. As the ship descended toward the surface, Harper could feel the weight of the mission settle on his shoulders. His hands gripped the rifle, adjusting the focus, checking the stabilizers. "This is it," Lena's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got one shot. Don't miss." Harper's jaw clenched as the dropship touched down in a valley far enough from the citadel to remain undetected but close enough for a clean shot. The team moved quickly, disembarking and making their way to the designated position, a rocky outcrop with a perfect line of sight to the Drekkari core. Harper surveyed the landscape as they set up. It was eerily quiet, save for the distant rumble of Drekkari ships above. He felt the tension coiling in his gut, the pressure of knowing that their survival depended entirely on his precision. "We're in position," he said to his team, his voice calm but sharp. "Set up. We're not here to fight. We're here to kill." The others nodded, taking their places behind cover, their eyes scanning for any signs of Drekkari patrols. Harper positioned himself at the highest point, the sniper rifle settled comfortably against his shoulder. He looked through the scope. There in the distance was the faintest outline of the citadel, towering, invincible. The seconds stretched out like hours. Harper's breathing slowed, steady. He knew what had to be done. He focused on the target, a small access panel near the heart of the Drekkari power core. If he hit it, the entire energy system could destabilize, causing a chain reaction that would tear apart their defenses. It was a small, vulnerable spot, but it was the only weakness they had. "Ready," Harper muttered under his breath. His finger hovered over the trigger. "Don't miss." Lena's voice echoed once more, though she didn't need to say it. Harper knew. The wind howled around him, the sounds of the battlefield faint in the distance. He had one shot that could end the war or end humanity itself. His finger tightened on the trigger. Chapter 2. The air was thick with dust as the team moved swiftly across the jagged landscape. The Drekkari homeworld sprawled before them, an imposing stretch of barren plains, jagged rock formations, and harsh winds that whipped across the empty expanse. The sky was a strange shade of purple, the atmosphere charged with the electric hum of energy fields that kept the planet's inhabitants safe from intrusion. But they were no longer safe. Not anymore. Captain Elias Harper led the way, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He wasn't just leading his team through hostile terrain. He was guiding them toward a final, impossible mission. They had no backup, no reinforcements, and no way of knowing whether they would even make it to the sniper's perch alive. But there was no turning back. Earth's last hope was pinned on the precision of a single shot. "Keep it tight," Harper called over his comms. "We can't afford to get sloppy." The team moved in silence, each member knowing the weight of what was at stake. The Drekkari citadel loomed in the distance, a stark silhouette against the violent sky. Towering spires shot up from the earth like jagged teeth, the architecture alien and incomprehensible to human eyes. The fortress was a monument to the Drekkari's arrogance, a symbol of their belief in their invincibility. But that invincibility, as they'd learned, had a flaw. A single small access point that could disable their power core, their shields, and with it their entire fleet. Lena's voice crackled in Harper's earpiece. "We're close. We'll need to move fast once we hit the perimeter." Harper didn't respond immediately. His mind was focused on the terrain ahead, the variables they hadn't accounted for, and the Drekkari patrols that might be lurking just beyond the horizon. He'd studied the planet's geography, the patterns of Drekkari movements, but even the best plans often fell apart when faced with the unknown. The team was nearing the high ridge that would give them the perfect vantage point. The path had been carefully chosen, stealthy, indirect, and as far from Drekkari observation as possible. But the closer they got to their target, the more on edge Harper became. The wind howled across the open plains, masking their movements, but also kept them exposed to any Drekkari units scouting from above. Harper scanned the horizon, his eyes flicking between the land and the night sky, where the Drekkari ships moved in unison like black shadows against the stars. "Hold up," Harper muttered, halting his team. He knelt, eyes narrowing as he studied a distant ridge. A Drekkari patrol was moving along it, their forms barely visible in the fading light. The Drekkari were no fools. They knew the humans were out there, somewhere, but they hadn't yet detected their precise location. This patrol would be the first real threat. The team dropped into a low crouch, pressing themselves into the rocky outcrop. Harper's eyes remained fixed on the patrol. He didn't need to tell them to stay still. The team knew the drill. They'd trained for this. The patrol passed within 100 yards, oblivious to their presence. Harper's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't let the adrenaline distract him. They had to stay calm, composed. One mistake could lead to detection, and that would mean certain death. Once the patrol was clear, Harper motioned for the team to continue. They moved swiftly, staying low to the ground, minimizing their profile as they ascended the ridge. The higher they climbed, the clearer the citadel became. Its sheer size was almost overwhelming. From this vantage point, Harper could make out the faint outline of the access panel they needed to hit, the one weak spot that might bring down the entire Drekkari Empire. The team reached the top of the ridge, and Harper's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the landscape. The citadel stretched out before them, an almost otherworldly structure of twisting metal and shimmering energy fields. The weak point, the small access panel, was located just beneath the central core, hidden in plain sight, but protected by layers of defensive systems. It wasn't an easy shot. Nothing about this mission was easy. "We're in position," Harper said, his voice tight with concentration. His team settled into position behind the ridge, using the natural cover provided by the rocks. The sniper rifle, a custom-built piece of human engineering, was set up on its tripod, its crosshairs trained on the citadel's heart. "Winds shifting," Jordan, the youngest of the team, said, adjusting his scope. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a nervous energy that was hard to ignore. "It's going to throw off the shot." Harper didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his own scope, fine-tuning the settings. The wind wasn't their biggest problem. The Drekkari shield was. The sniper rifle they were using was designed specifically to penetrate the energy field, but the shot had to be perfect. Too much force, and it would ricochet. Too little, it wouldn't make it through. The team worked in silence, their eyes trained on the target. Harper double-checked the rifle, ensuring that every setting was precisely calibrated. The power core was in range, but they couldn't afford to waste a single shot. As Harper prepared to take the shot, a new complication emerged. "Drekkari Patrol, 12 o'clock. Lena's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Looks like they're making a pass through the valley." Harper's gaze snapped to the valley below, where a group of Drekkari soldiers appeared, moving in tight formation. They were too close. If they spotted the team, it would be over. There was no way they could fight their way out of this. "Stay down," Harper hissed. "Let them pass." The team dropped to the ground, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Harper's breath came in shallow gasps, his fingers tightening around the rifle. The patrol moved closer, their heavy footsteps vibrating through the earth. It felt like hours before they were finally out of sight. Once the threat had passed, Harper exhaled slowly. His heart was pounding, his mind racing, but he didn't have time to waste. The shot had to be taken now. The longer they waited, the higher the risk of discovery. He looked through the scope again, focusing on the weak point in the citadel. This was it. His finger hovered over the trigger. "Get ready," he muttered, his voice steady. One shot, no mistakes. The wind howled again, stronger this time, but Harper's resolve was unshaken. His team had made it this far, and they weren't about to back down now. The crosshairs settled into place. Chapter 3. The wind had picked up, howling across the barren landscape as Captain Elias Harper steadied his sniper rifle. His team had successfully reached their firing position, high atop the rocky ridge overlooking the Drekkari citadel. Below them, the massive fortress was a dark silhouette against the swirling storm clouds, its shimmering energy shield flickering ominously. The only thing standing between humanity's survival and certain extinction was the smallest of weaknesses, a single vulnerable access panel on the citadel's core. Harper checked the rifle one last time, adjusting the scope, ensuring the settings were precise. He wasn't just aiming for the panel. He was aiming to end a war. The shot would have to be perfect, flawless in every way. A single miscalculation could cost them everything. His fingers hovered above the trigger, his eyes locked onto the citadel. The distance was immense, the terrain treacherous, and the risk unbearable. But there was no turning back. "Harper, are you seeing this?" Lena's voice cut through the silence. He glanced up at his team, their positions scattered along the ridge, each sniper focusing on their own tasks. Lena was crouched low to the ground, her rifle at the ready, scanning the horizon. Her voice carried an edge of tension that Harper couldn't ignore. "What is it?" he asked, his voice steady. "There's movement down below." "Drekkari patrols," Lena said, pointing toward the valley. "They're getting closer. They're not supposed to be here at this hour." Harper's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the valley. Sure enough, several Drekkari soldiers, armed and alert, were moving in their direction. They appeared to be scanning the area, their eyes trained on the ridge. Harper's gut tightened. The patrol was too close, and they had no way of knowing how many more might be in the area. "Can we avoid them?" Harper asked, keeping his voice low. Lena didn't hesitate. "Not if they keep heading this way. We'll be exposed." Harper's mind raced as he weighed their options. The patrol would be on top of them within minutes. A confrontation now would draw attention, too much attention. They needed to finish this quietly, without drawing any more attention than they already had. "All right," Harper said, his voice low and calm despite the rising tension. "We wait. They'll move on. If they get too close, we'll have to take them out." Jordan, the youngest of the team, shifted uneasily beside him. "You think they'll detect us?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Not if we stay still," Harper replied, never taking his eyes off the advancing patrol. His pulse quickened, but his breathing remained steady. He'd been through worse situations before, but this one felt different. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders, and the pressure was palpable. The entire human race was depending on him to make the shot. As the patrol drew closer, Harper couldn't help but feel the weight of the mission bearing down on him. The Drekkari, with their advanced technology and centuries of dominance, had never truly believed that humans could pose a serious threat. They had underestimated humanity's ingenuity. And now, the humans had found a way to turn the tables by exploiting the one thing the Drekkari never expected: vulnerability. The patrol drew closer, moving steadily toward the ridge. Harper motioned for the team to drop lower, huddling behind the rocky outcrop that provided their cover. He could hear their heavy footsteps, the clink of their armor, the mechanical hum of their weapons. His mind sharpened, focusing on every detail of the situation. "Hold tight," he whispered, knowing that one wrong move could expose them. The patrol was now within 50 meters. Harper could make out the faces of the Drekkari soldiers, tall, formidable, their features set in an expression of disdain. They moved like machines, confident in their superiority. They couldn't possibly understand that they were walking into a trap. Harper's breathing slowed. His finger gently rested against the trigger of the sniper rifle, ready to fire if needed, but he resisted the urge. The team stayed still, barely breathing, waiting for the patrol to pass. Every second felt like an eternity, the sound of the patrol's movement echoing in his ears. And then, finally, the patrol turned and continued past them, unaware of the humans hiding mere yards away. Harper let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The danger had passed for now, but they couldn't afford to relax. "Close," Lena muttered, barely audible. Harper gave her a sharp nod. "It's not over yet. Keep your eyes on the target." The team remained low until the patrol was a safe distance away. When it was clear, Harper signaled for them to move forward. They quickly repositioned themselves, staying low as they approached the next critical phase, taking the shot. Harper's mind raced through the variables: wind speed, distance, the power of the rifle. They had accounted for every possible angle, but there were always unknowns. The Drekkari shield could flicker unexpectedly. The power core might not respond the way they anticipated. "Harper," Jordan said, his voice tight with anxiety. "You sure this is going to work? I mean, what if we're wrong? What if we miss?" Harper glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "We don't have a choice. We can't afford to fail." Jordan didn't reply. He knew the stakes as well as anyone. They were all in this together, and if Harper missed, it wouldn't just be his failure. It would be the end of humanity. Harper adjusted the rifle once again, aligning the crosshairs with the small, vulnerable access panel. It seemed almost insignificant, a small rectangle in the center of the citadel. But it was the only way to bring the entire Drekkari empire to its knees. The team stayed silent, each person focused on the task at hand. Harper's finger rested lightly on the trigger. He was ready. This was it. Then, Lena's voice crackled in his earpiece. Drekkari ships incoming. Harper's heart skipped a beat. He peered through the scope again, and sure enough, a squadron of Drekkari ships was approaching at high speed, their sleek, deadly forms cutting through the sky. The mission had just gone from impossible to even more dangerous. Harper's mind raced. We need to do this now. We can't wait. He took a breath, focusing on the target. The ships were closing in fast, but it was too late for them to stop the shot. With one final exhale, Harper squeezed the trigger. Chapter 4. Harper's finger tightened on the trigger, but for a moment, time seemed to stretch, distorting his perception of reality. The entire world outside the scope of his rifle seemed to blur. Everything except the tiny access panel at the heart of the Drekkari citadel. His breathing slowed. The distant rumble of Drekkari ships and the faint echo of patrols seemed to vanish, replaced by a sharp, almost unnerving stillness. It was just him, the rifle, and the singular mission, to fire a single shot that could end the war. He had trained for moments like this, moments where everything hung in the balance. But no amount of training had prepared him for the weight of this one. The mission had moved from tactical planning to pure instinct. The pressure was suffocating, but his mind remained clear, focused. The faint hum of the wind stirred the air around him, a constant reminder that the world beyond this moment was still turning. But none of it mattered. The shot had to be made. Now, he could feel the rifle's gentle vibration as his finger continued to pull. The target in the scope grew sharper, its vulnerability clearer. The access panel, small and insignificant against the enormity of the citadel, was humanity's last hope. Harper, Lena's voice broke through the stillness, her voice a whisper through the earpiece. The Drekkari ships, they're coming closer. Harper barely registered the words. His focus remained on the shot, on the microsecond it would take to change everything. He inhaled deeply, his lungs filling with air before he exhaled slowly, calming his nerves. His finger twitched slightly, then a low hum interrupted his thoughts. It was faint at first, a subtle vibration in the air, but it quickly grew louder. The sound of energy surging. Harper's eyes flicked up to the sky. His blood ran cold. The Drekkari ships had arrived. The sleek, angular vessels appeared like black streaks in the sky, their outlines sharp against the darkening horizon. They moved in a tight formation, slowly descending toward the ridge, their energy shields pulsating with a menacing glow. They were drawing closer, too close, too fast. Damn it, Harper muttered under his breath. We don't have much time. He quickly rechecked the rifle's alignment, his mind calculating the dwindling window of opportunity. If he hesitated now, they would be discovered. If the Drekkari ships closed in any further, they would be forced to abort the mission entirely. Harper, Lena's voice came again, this time louder, urgent. If you don't take the shot now, we're done. Do it. Now. The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. They had one chance, no more. The Drekkari would see them if they didn't act. Every second spent waiting now could mean the end of everything they had fought for. He didn't waste another thought on it. With a final, sharp breath, he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, breaking the silence with a deafening crack. The world seemed to slow as the bullet cut through the air, a streak of light in the dark. The sound of it reverberated in Harper's ears, but all he could focus on was the moment it left the barrel. It was the culmination of every lesson he'd learned, every challenge he'd overcome. It was a singular act of defiance against a species that thought they were invincible. For a moment, the world held its breath. The bullet hit its mark. There was a brief flash of light, a brief flicker in the Drekkari shield. The access panel cracked, then shattered, sending a ripple of energy across the citadel. The ground trembled beneath Harper's feet, and the sky seemed to darken further as the citadel's shields flickered and collapsed. For one brief, glorious moment, the Drekkari were vulnerable. The moment of triumph, however, was short-lived. The citadel's core pulsed with sudden energy, and Harper could hear the roar of the Drekkari ships growing louder. A warning signal blared in his earpiece. "Harper!" Lena's voice was sharp with panic. "They've detected us. The ships are locking onto our position. We need to get out of here now." Harper's heart hammered in his chest. There was no time to savor the victory. Only the cold, hard truth that their survival now depended on speed. The Drekkari were coming, and they were coming fast. "Move out!" Harper barked. "Now!" The team scrambled to pack up their gear, their movements quick and precise. The once calm scene of meticulous planning had turned chaotic in an instant. The distant sound of Drekkari's ships charging up their weapons filled the air, a constant reminder of the danger they were now facing. Harper didn't wait to see if the shot had completely disabled the Drekkari's defenses. He had only one priority now: escape. "Where's the extraction point?" Jordan asked, his voice breathless as he slung his rifle over his shoulder. Harper didn't hesitate. "East, 300 meters. Move fast." The team dashed across the ridge, ducking low behind rocks and debris, trying to remain unseen. But the Drekkari ships were closing in too quickly. Harper could hear their engines whining as they accelerated, their weapons primed and ready. A sudden burst of energy shot past them, narrowly missing a rock outcrop they had just passed. The Drekkari had spotted them. "Go, go, go!" Harper shouted, his heart pounding in his chest. "Don't stop until we're clear." They ran through the rugged terrain, the sound of Drekkari weapons echoing behind them. The air was thick with dust and the hum of energy blasts as they dodged and weaved, barely avoiding the incoming fire. The rocky landscape seemed endless, but in reality, they were barely a few minutes away from their extraction point. A sudden explosion rocked the ground behind them, sending a cloud of dirt and debris into the air. Harper stumbled but caught himself, never breaking his stride. They were almost there, just a little longer. As the extraction point came into view, the team sprinted toward the waiting dropship, its engines roaring in the distance. Harper could see the door beginning to close, but it wouldn't wait for long. "Get in," he shouted as he leaped onto the ship, followed closely by the rest of the team. The door sealed shut just as a massive energy blast from the Drekkari ships struck the ground where they had been seconds earlier. The dropship shot into the air, narrowly avoiding another barrage of fire. Harper collapsed into one of the seats, his breathing ragged, his body trembling with adrenaline. They had made it, but the battle was far from over. The captain looked at his team, his mind racing. The mission had succeeded, but at what cost? The Drekkari would not rest until they had retaliated. "We're not out of this yet," Harper said, his voice low but steady. "This is just the beginning." The team exchanged looks, their faces a mix of exhaustion and grim resolve. Harper was right. The war had only just begun. Chapter 5. The Argonaut shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere, the ship's hull vibrating from the force of the atmospheric drag. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the sharp scent of burnt ozone mixing with the sterile hum of the command center. Captain Elias Harper sat silently in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, watching as Earth loomed larger beneath him. His mission had been successful, at least in part. The Drekkari's shields were down, and their power core had been destabilized. But the war was far from over. "Captain, we're clear of Drekkari territory." Lena's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the silence. "We'll reach Earth's orbit in 30 minutes. Harper didn't respond right away. His mind was still racing. The aftermath of the mission weighed heavily on him. The shot had been perfect, he had known it would be. But the consequences of their success were more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The Drekkari were not the type of enemies to simply accept defeat. They would retaliate with everything they had. "How long until we get a full read on the damage?" Harper asked, his voice low. Lena hesitated. "It's too early to say. The Drekkari are reeling, but they'll regroup. We need to prepare for a counteroffensive. We're not out of the woods yet." Harper nodded, his gaze never leaving the distant planet below. He felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The Drekkari had been stunned by their vulnerability, by the very thing they had never believed possible. But Harper knew this would only fuel their rage. They had made the mistake of underestimating humanity once. They wouldn't make it again. "Harper," Jordan's voice broke through his thoughts. The youngest sniper was seated nearby, staring at the screen in front of him, his expression tense. You think we did enough? Harper turned slowly, meeting the young man's eyes. Jordan had been with him through everything, every close call, every narrow escape. He had seen the terror on Earth's surface, the broken cities, the desperate fight for survival. Jordan wanted answers, but Harper didn't have them. We did what we had to, Harper replied, his voice steady. But it's only the beginning. The room fell quiet again, the weight of the reality sinking in. The Argonaut's engines hummed steadily as it made its way toward Earth. But the quiet was interrupted by a new voice, a voice filled with authority, yet tinged with disbelief. Harper, you're needed in the briefing room. Harper turned to find General Theodore Ross standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the frame. The general's face was grim, his usual stoic demeanor cracked by the visible weight of the situation. There were no pleasantries this time, no preambles. The general simply stepped aside, gesturing for Harper to follow. Harper stood, his muscles stiff from the tension of the mission. As he followed Ross down the narrow corridor of the ship, his thoughts turned again to the Drekkari. They had been so certain of their superiority, so convinced that their empire was untouchable. But now they were scrambling. That much was clear from the chaotic signals intercepted on their way out of the Drekkari system. They entered the briefing room, where a holographic map of Earth's defenses floated in the center of the table. A dozen officers were seated around the table, their faces tight with apprehension. The moment Harper stepped inside, every eye turned toward him. Ross wasted no time. Captain, you've done the impossible. But now we have to look at the bigger picture. The Drekkari are reeling, but they won't stay down for long. They're already regrouping their forces. We need to capitalize on this moment. Harper's mind immediately snapped into focus. The momentary victory had already begun to feel distant. The war had shifted. The Drekkari had shown their hand. Now it was time for humanity to strike. They'll retaliate, Harper said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the room. But their arrogance might give us a chance. We know their weaknesses now. The officers exchanged looks, their skepticism evident. But Ross didn't hesitate. What do you propose? The general asked. Harper didn't pause. He had already been formulating a plan during the flight back. He knew the Drekkari's next move would be swift, and the Earth's defenses, already weakened from the Long War, would be vulnerable. But with the Drekkari's power core destabilized, there was an opportunity to launch a decisive strike. We need to hit them while they're weak, Harper said, his tone deliberate. We use their own tactics against them. We know the location of their regrouping fleet. We strike hard and fast before they can rebuild their shields. Lena, who had followed Harper into the briefing room, spoke up. But we're low on resources, Captain. Our fleets are scattered, and the Drekkari still have far superior firepower. Harper met her gaze, his expression unwavering. Then we use our ingenuity. We deploy smaller, more mobile strike teams. No direct confrontation. We don't need to beat them at their game. We just need to keep them off balance long enough to get the upper hand. General Ross nodded slowly, his eyes hardening as he considered the plan. It's risky, but we've seen that humanity can outthink them. We're already on the back foot, but we have one thing they don't: unpredictability. They won't know what's coming. Harper felt the eyes of the room shift toward him, some with doubt, others with newfound respect. For the first time in months, there was a flicker of hope in the air. The general stood and looked around the room. Get the fleets ready. We move as soon as possible. Harper, you'll lead the first wave. Take out their reinforcements. We'll keep them guessing. Harper nodded. Understood. As the briefing ended and the officers dispersed, Harper lingered, his thoughts swirling. The Drekkari were wounded but not defeated. They would come for Earth with everything they had. But humanity had learned something crucial in this war. They weren't powerless. They had the ability to adapt, to outthink their enemies. As he stepped back into the corridor, Lena fell into step beside him. She was quiet at first, her face a mask of concentration. You really think we can win this? She asked, her voice low. Harper stopped for a moment, his gaze turning toward the viewport where Earth gleamed in the distance. The future was uncertain, the road ahead filled with peril. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't as worried about the outcome. "We have no choice," he said simply. The war had shifted. The Drekkari, once invincible, were now on the back foot. But their response would be swift and deadly. As the fleet prepared for its next move, humanity had taken the first step toward proving that they were more than just survivors. They were fighters, and the Drekkari had just learned what it meant to underestimate them. The battle had just begun.